Who would have thought a few decades ago that steel would ever be considered a luxury material for wristwatches? And now in the present, who would have ever thought that rubber would be equipped to some of the most expensive watches that money can buy? On one side, it is utterly ridiculous when you think about it, and on the other side, it gives the watch added comfort, versatility, and contrast. Some will argue that people who buy watches like these have more money than sense, but is that all? Today I would like to hone in on two of the most sought-after pieces found on rubber straps that are relatively affordable when compared to the other pieces that you just saw. Both of these watches are priced in a similar bracket. Both are considered relatively unobtainable because of their demand. Both are gorgeous, and there are two pieces that I really think make for excellent watches. The Patek Phillipe Aquanaut reference 5167A and the Rolex Daytona reference 116519LN. I will discuss both of them at length and then pull together some final thoughts on which I believe makes a better watch for everyday use. And let's not kid around. It would be a privilege for any of us to own either of them. They would make an incredible two-piece collection. Being pedantic, let me clarify that when I say rubber, I'm referring to the straps, but they are in fact a polymer composite comprised of silicone with a handful of other ingredients. Rubber is just the generic term we throw around in the biz. So let's begin by addressing the introduction of rubber to major watch brands. Why was this done in the first place? The concrete answer is multi-layered, but I would imagine that the first major culprits were the haute horology producers. At least they were the ones to really make the idea mainstream. So the likes of Richard Mille, a company that prides itself with experimental concept watches, pushed their watches out on rubber integrated straps, and because of their glowing success, other major manufacturers wanted a piece of the action. But then, interestingly, we look at a watch like the Patek Phillipe Aquanaut, a piece that has been in production for over 20 years and began production in 1997. The watch always used rubber straps as a part of its identity. So while some watches gained popularity with the straps, others had always used them. And now because of the buzz in the industry, everyone is pushing their products to market with them. But I also believe that third-party manufacturers had a huge part to play in the change that we are seeing. Brands like Rubber Bee and Everest create some of the most high-quality rubber straps on the market and have tailored them for practically any watch. So of course the larger corporations felt like they needed to introduce their own product to market. And it is fascinating to see what has been produced because of it. Competition always allows creative opportunity. Speaking from a design point of view, a rubber strap on a watch offers many things for the wearer. They are water resistant, they are light and durable, they are relatively inert for sensitive skins. They are also very comfortable on the wrist and offer a differing surface for finishing. And this contrast can make materials like polished and brushed steel stand out a lot more on a watch. All of the above is great, but then there are downsides, like the fact that rubber will eventually wear out and will have to be replaced. And then of course we cannot discuss the idea of rubber on a watch without saying that there is an air of cheapness to its appearance. There is this juxtaposition around having material like plastic on a luxury product. But then, as I said in the beginning, who would have ever thought that steel would ever be considered a luxury material either? Now, if I was a manufacturer, I'd be rubbing my hands together with joy, because I am spending less of my money on manufacturing bracelets. The whole process of injection molding a polymer is far, far cheaper and simpler than just machining parts. So bear that in mind too. But with all of that out of the way, let's get into discussing the pieces. The Patek Phillipe Aquanaut, a modern interpretation of the Nautilus. I have said this a few times before, that it is a bold move for a company to create an entirely new piece. See my video on Piaget about the subject. But it is even harder when mirroring such an iconic watch, and I genuinely think that Patek nailed the idea with this piece. It has been in production for over 20 years, and has managed to stay virtually the same ever since its inception. So it is safe to say, I believe, that they have once again created a design icon. Does it look better than the Nautilus? I wouldn't go so far to say that. That's my opinion. But it does introduce elements that modernizes the Nautilus design in a few areas. So let's look at it closer. One of the watch's biggest strengths is the addition of the rubber strap, simply because of how well it breaks up the steel. It's strange when you think about it. The rubber on this piece accentuates the polished metal and sharpens the finishing on the bezel and the case. It simply looks stunning in this configuration. Notice the tire-like texture in the center and how it segments, adding more texture to the material. And speaking about the strap, I have to mention that the clasp is one of the most elegant pieces of design that I've ever seen on any watch. Admittedly, it took me time to warm up to the overall design of the Aquanaut, but from the beginning, the clasp had my undivided attention. Sprung steel that acts as the watch's clasp is such a smart design, and it is a beautiful exercise in restraint. Looking at the watch in this configuration, it looks pared down, simple, elegant. What more would you want? It has the status of a high-end watch, but like traditional Patek Philippe pieces, it is so under the radar that the everyday person wouldn't even notice it. I would say it is like the steel equivalent of a Calatrava. The modern aspects of this watch can be seen on the case and the dial. It has been tailored, reducing the Nautilus shoulders into simple crown guards. Combining polished lugs with a polished surround on the bezel creates a harmony, and you can trace a line from the bezel to the lugs. The piece is extremely elegant, and paired with a dial of numerals instead of thin batons gives the watch a more instrumental feel. It appears more like a sports watch, and I get the feeling of a field watch or a Flieger when I glance at it quick enough. If we now go into the dial, the one aspect that really stands out to me is how the minute track is so bold and in the forefront. I like that aspect a lot because it reduces the amount of open space on the dial, and also makes the reading of the time easier. The minute hand corresponds by meeting each marker on the minute track, and it is a nice piece of detail. It is strange seeing batons and numerals used on the same dial, but this is what gives the watch its character, and it is the defining feature of the piece. The dial and how it has been cut can also appear strange in some lights, but I appreciate that they try to create a three-dimensional form with the lines instead of just cutting them horizontally. And I love the fact that the new olive drab piece that was released this year has been nicknamed the Frag Grenade. I can't get over the color. It is such a gorgeous choice for an everyday watch, and is a fantastic color for this piece. It stood out to me as one of the highlights of Basel World 2019. Now, do I think that everything about this watch works? No. This watch is not perfect. And like I've said many times before, no product is truly perfect. That does not mean, however, that a product cannot near perfection. I think what confuses me the most about it is that it is placed in a strange category. Like the Nautilus, it is marketed as a sports watch, but is also a dress watch. Like the Nautilus, it is the kind of watch that you could use every day and enjoy, but at the same time, would you? It is a grey area watch in my book, and I think the design of it reflects my thoughts. I do like the fact that the case is not integrated with the strap. I find the contrast striking, but the main question is, does the dial serve the overall design of this piece? By that I mean, do the numerals make or break the watch? I personally think that they do make the watch, but it is debatable. They offer a great visual difference to other pieces in the sports watch genre, but it still looks strange to me. I haven't completely warmed up to the styling of the watch yet. And my pet peeve, date complications and their placement. All this watch needs is either a black date wheel or a date window at the 6 o'clock position, like in the mock-ups that I've pulled together. It's a simple fix that would clean the dial up even more. These options to me look more balanced. And Patek have done it with the likes of the reference 5035 before. It just leaves a bitter taste in my mouth when the balance of a watch is offset by an irregularly sized date complication. But that's just me. It is an absolutely stunning watch nonetheless. On to the competition, the Rolex Daytona. Not the cliché Daytona, but the model specifically made to fit a rubber strap. Now, with the huge demand for steel pieces, this Daytona, reference 116519LN, is the best kept secret in their catalogue. For those of you who don't know, this piece is a callback to a vintage reference, the 6263 Big Red, and I think it is absolutely gorgeous as a modern interpretation. So for this line, and a few others, Rolex introduced what they call an Oysterflex bracelet, and it has a few tricks up its sleeve. One of the big words surrounding the name Rolex is durability, and so, to increase the life of their straps, they introduced a titanium and nickel alloy core as a thin blade of material running through the center of the strap. This does a few things, but most importantly, holds the strap's rigidity and form while it is on and off the wrist. But that is not all. They introduced channels to the underside of the strap, and this to me, like how the Aquanaut introduced the beautifully spare deployant clasp, the bellows underneath these Oysterflex straps are fascinating. Basically, they create artificial tension against the wrist, and this does a few things. First, it keeps a large majority of the material away from the wrist, so that sweat does not corrupt it. Second, it provides space for aeration through the channels while it is on the wrist. And third, it contributes to preserving the life of the strap, since it is under less tension. How fascinating is that? Of all the innovations that Rolex has brought out, this to me is one of the best. And it is such a simple concept and execution when you think about it. The typical oyster clasp has also been integrated into the strap and is robust for everyday wear, but I feel like the inspiration behind this integration was taken directly from the likes of Everest and Rubber B straps. And to differentiate themselves further, Rolex created a small half end link that visually merges the strap with the case of the watch. This is an interesting addition, and something that I'm still warming up to. But moving to the watch case itself, it follows the same build of a typical modern Daytona, but with a difference. Every metal surface of this watch is white gold. That's right. So you're getting a much more reflective, bright luster for a surface finish that is then countered by a satin finished rubber strap. Like the Aquanaut, this contrast makes the watch all the more visually interesting. But here is where it gets cool. The black and grey contrast is striking throughout the watch, and the understanding of uniformity with this piece makes it very desirable. The black ceramic bezel paired with a full black set of subdials and a black rubber strap, and then the dial being of a radially brushed steel finish, matching the white gold case. More than anything else, this combination just looks correct with this piece. It looks understated, but also elegant in this format, and would look amazing in different lights. But of course the engagement doesn't stop there, because you have a complication of a chronograph. The subdials being filled makes the chronograph more easier to read at a glance, and completes the watch for my eye. Do I think that everything about this watch works well? No. The watch is always criticized about the amount of text on the dial, and I also feel that it is too much. But the subdials and their placement is what bothers me the most with these modern Daytonas. I talk about the transition from zenith movements to the modern movements in the above video, but essentially there is an unbalance with the two subdials at the 3 and the 9 position. You can see it plain as day that the batons do not line up with them. The end links, in the back of my mind, I have a thought that the polished center link might be a bit too much for such a small piece of material, and maybe it might benefit the watch more if it was just a smooth piece of material instead. So in this example, I've taken the watch and made a few adjustments. Reduced the subdials to allow them to fit the dial better, adding to the overall symmetry, removed some of the text and centered it, smoothed out the end link and reduced the size of the crown guards, making it look more recessed. So collecting everything together, I have assigned a word for each piece. For the Daytona, the word substance comes to mind, and for the Aquanaut, the word refinement. Bringing them side by side again, I have to reiterate that both pieces are beautiful and offer a lot for what you are buying. Either of them are excellent choices, but one watch for me outshines the other by a country mile, and I'm sure you would have worked it out by now. That is the Daytona. Now normally I would go for the Patek. Like in another steel watch category, I chose the Nautilus over the Royal Oak and the Daytona, but in this discussion I believe that the Daytona is ahead for a few reasons. Bear in mind that you are paying similar money for these pieces. First, the materials. The Aquanaut is made out of steel, and the Daytona is made from gold. Now gold as an everyday watch sounds precarious, but with the addition of a rubber strap it makes the watch more versatile to wear and offers less opportunity for components to be scratched. Adding to that, in place of a brushed steel bezel you have a ceramic bezel, so the durability is improved. There is opportunity for micro adjustments with the Daytona's strap, and with the added bellows and the metal core to the Oysterflex, I believe that it will be more durable than the Aquanauts over time. Then to top it off, you have a chronograph movement, which in my eyes beats the simple 3-hand and date complication as an everyday wearer. I have to reiterate that the Daytona is not perfect, with the strange subdials, text and end links, purely on a durable front, with all the elements put together. I feel that the Daytona would serve someone better, since durability beats refinement when it comes down to versatility. So in a nutshell, the Aquanaut to me is a more beautiful and more outstanding watch, but the Daytona is more functional. Your thoughts on the subject might differ, but regardless of the watch, I find it interesting that at this point in time, rubber has become such a hot topic in the watch community. Who would have ever thought that we would arrive at this point? And the real question is, will it go the distance? Who knows? But no matter what you choose, rubber straps will always have a shelf life, just like so many of the finer things we surround ourselves with. Then you always have a bracelet to fall back on.